Hello everybody and welcome to another Minecraft Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys send me your questions regarding all things Disney, whether it's the parks or the movies or the history, and I try to give you answers to the best of my abilities. I've got 4 great questions today, and let's just jump right in. So, first question today is a what if, and it comes from Tyler Sims, who asks, "Hey Rob, what do you think Disney would do if Florida lowered the height limit of buildings without having a light on it?" So what he's talking about is the fact that Disney very cleverly kept the height of most of their tallest structures just below the federal regulations for when you need to put a flashing light on it for low-flying aircraft. So for instance, I believe Everest is 199.5 feet. So it's half a foot shorter than what it needs to be before it needs a light. And the reason they do that is because they don't want that flashing light to sort of break up the mood of the build. You know, we don't think of Mount Everest as having a light on top, or, you know, the Tower of Terror, all these different things. So, what would happen if they lowered the height limit? I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, I'd say right off the bat, I don't think they ever would. I think as today, as the future goes on and technology gets better, I think we're going to be less dependent on some more classic means of detection, like a flashing light. So if anything, I think you could see the height raised. And then it gets into all these legal things where I'm sure, you know, certain structures would be grandfathered into the old laws because there would be such a cost for adding that sort of thing. And then you have to consider that Disney's such a large company that, you know, you have to ask yourself and wonder, maybe they would just, you know, apply to be exempt from this new rule, and maybe it would actually happen, or you know, they would lobby against it even becoming an official law down in Florida. So I think there are a lot of gears at play there, but I think the short of it is they would do whatever it takes to make sure they don't have to put lights on those structures. Whether it's, you know, if it's a short change, like 10 feet less, then they just make the structures 10 feet, you know, lower. Or if it's a bigger change, I think they would either put a stop to it or get an exemption or just make sure it doesn't happen at all. But it's an interesting what if to think about. Our next question comes from Jay Walker, who says, "Hey Rob, I've heard when Walt was buying the Florida properties, he wanted to keep it on the down low, so he created fake companies to buy up the land. I've also been told the names of these companies can be found on a candy shop on Main Street. Is this true? If so, can you tell me the names of the companies and further explain? Thanks and have a wonderful day." So yes, indeed. When Walt was picking up land for what was going to be the Florida project, at that point Disney was a big name. They were famous for their films. Disneyland was very big, and he knew ahead of time that if he had announced this project and was open about it, that landowners in the area would charge an arm and a leg because they think Disney, big name, they have tons of money, let's ask them for lots of money for this land. So if they posed as these no-name companies, they'd get better deals. And so it was very secretive. I actually didn't know any of the company names off the top of my head, but I remember reading about them in Reality Land, which is a book all about the creation of Disney World. And some of them right here, let's see. They set up about half a dozen dummy corporations. So some of these include the A4 Corporation, Bay Lake Properties, Tomahawk Properties, Compass East, and the Latin America Development and Management Corporation, Reedy Creek Ranch Lands. They're all like really boring names, and that's on purpose because you don't want to draw attention to yourself. You don't want people digging in deeper and figuring out why these companies are buying up all this land, and then they just start raising the prices. So you try to come up with a dull and boring name that, you know, is sort of easily forgettable. And that goes across a lot of different industries, you know. The other great example of this that I remember is Star Wars and what's it called? Blue Harvest, which you might have heard if you're a big Star Wars fan. And that was the actual, that was the fake name that they used when they were making Return of the Jedi. And a lot of popular film franchises will use fake names when they're in production. And the reason is they'll get cheaper prices when it comes to like renting locations or doing certain things, because you hear this generic movie Blue Harvest or these companies and you think, oh, they're boring no names, they don't have a lot of money. But if you think it's a Star Wars or a Disney, you know, they jack it up. So those are some of the names that they used. Yeah. And it was super secretive. I believe the person behind it, like, had worked with, you know, setting up the, what do I want to call it, the OSS, like this very, very spy-like almost, to make it happen. And that was really interesting. If you want to know more, Realityland's a great book that sort of talks about that setting up of Disney World. Our next question comes from Jakey Jern, who asks, hey Rob, new question, what's your favorite mini show at Walt Disney World? For example, the Dapper Dans and the other walk-around events. Thanks. My favorite have to be, without a doubt, the Streemosphere performers in Hollywood Studios. I think they're really fun. They're a bunch of like improv actors that'll walk around, and they all have a sort of different archetype, you know, very, very exaggerated caricatures of these different characters, and they'll walk around and just break out into these improv scenes, and they'll get people involved who are, you know, around. And I think the one scene that sticks out to me most is like the cop, I think, who wants to, like, he's a new cop who wants to ask this actress out to a policeman's ball or something, and he's like asking people in the audience for advice, and I find that stuff to be really cool, and it's really fun because, you know, it involves the people who are there. It's funny and different each time. I mean, yeah, they'll stick to a general theme, but because it's improv, it's always a little different each time. And it's just like one of those really enjoyable experiences that you never plan for. You don't go, well, it's 3 o'clock, let's go find the Streetmosphere performers on Sunset Boulevard. It's just one of those things you stumble across when you're walking around. And I wish they did more of stuff like that because I think it's really cool. And then finally this week, we have a question from Hayden Stansberry, who says, hey Rob, I have a question for the next Q&A. So my family has finally saved up enough money for a big vacation for spring break. We already decided that we want to go to Disney, but should we go to Disneyland or Disney World? I have been to Disney World since I live on the East Coast, but it has been several years and I think I'd enjoy the parks more now. I've never been to Disneyland or California. I know there's more to do in Disney World than land, but in your opinion, where should we go? It's an interesting question, and one that hits close to home because I'm in a very similar situation where, like, I finally have, you know, I've saved up and I think there's a Disney trip in my near future, but I'm debating on whether it should be Disneyland or Disney World. And in a similar sense, I've been to Disney World before, but I've never been to Disneyland. So I've been sort of tackling this question myself. It really depends on a lot of things, like what kind of vacation family are you? Are you going to want to go to one place? If you go to Disneyland, is that it? Is it just going to be Disneyland and you go home? Or are you going to do a tour of California? Because, yes, I agree. There's less to do in Disneyland than Disney World, just by the nature of how there are less parks and less activities. But that doesn't mean what's there isn't good. You know, there's a great amount of history in Disneyland. I would totally love to go to Disneyland one day, and I very well might. So I don't know. That's a tough question. It really boils down to what do you want? Do you want this singular experience for your vacation, in which case Disney World's the best bet. You're going to get the most for your buck. Or do you want to do this, you know, bouncing around and seeing different things, in which case I'd say do Disneyland, but then do other things in California. Go see Hollywood and maybe, you know, go up to San Francisco and just see all these other different places so it becomes a bigger tour. And then, you know, you have to take into account things like when are you going to go again after that? You know, if this is your one trip in, you know, the next couple of years, then yeah, you're going to want to go to with what your gut, I guess, where you want to go the most, right? Because you have this one shot. But if, you know, you're the type of family that vacations every year, every other year, then, you know, maybe take a chance with something you haven't done before. And if it's not what you think it would be, or if it doesn't live up to the hype, then, you know, there's always the next vacation after that. So I don't know. I wish I had a clear-cut answer for you on that one. I'm gonna try to figure out myself. Anyway, thank you guys for the questions this week. If you have a question Disney related, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I try to get to as many of them as possible, if not on the video itself, at least in the comments. If you want to ask me a question more directly, you can do so on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays on Twitter. I'm RobPlaysAGame on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you next time for the next episode of the Minecraft Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.